Okay, so hi Henry. So you're one of the developers, one of the curators of Liberating Structures, and I wanted to have this conversation with you because I have a couple of questions that I've always been meaning to ask. Thought it would be interesting to ask them. You can answer in any way you see fit. Would be great if like you're still having breakfast, and I want this to be casual. I don't want this to be polished. It's not an interview, it's a conversation that we have.
We can try.
So one of the things I've been really wondering is like, how did you first get into complexity theory? So because it's such when you get into liberating structures, there's so the complexity theory is so woven into these structures and the whole thinking behind it. And I was wondering, like, what was the moment when you got started with it, and what was it?
Well, I was still working at Merck, and one of the guys that was reporting to me, who was the vice president for Asia, actually, uh, gave me a book called Leadership and the New Science.
Right.
And I read it, and I thought it was fascinating because it was the first time, I think it was the first time that I came across, let's say, theories that I could relate to, that fitted with the way I understood leadership and management and organization. And so this idea of an organization being a living system, that really, I loved it. And so that was the beginning of my journey. And
So how did it progress from there? Like you read that one book. Was there like did
yeah,
you get
what happened is that I did read a second book by Meg Whitley called A Simpler Way. That was an absolutely beautiful book. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's a pleasure to read. And and that was not very long before I retired. I don't really remember the timing, but so after I retire, because of my connection with some other people, I ended up being who knew about my interests. Okay, I was that. I ended up being invited to a gathering of people that were interested in complexity, and because I was retired, I had time. So instead of saying no to the invitation, which is what would have happened if I had been working, I would have been probably traveling somewhere in the world. I went to that gathering, and I spent a couple of days with about some 60 other people or so, and it was absolutely wonderful. A fantastic group of people, and I loved it, and we had fun. It was intellectually stimulating. It was warm. It was really everything you would want to be about a gathering of people who mostly didn't know each other. Some of them knew each other, but and so that was the beginning of my connection with the community of people interested in the application of complexity science or theory into organizational life. So that's how it started. And so it's one accident followed by another accident, followed by a third accident. And do you want me to continue the story, or do you want to interrupt and ask some other question?
Yeah, I think I want to interrupt. That's because I was just really interested. Like, I mean, we've talked about this before. Like, you had a career as an executive that was really successful, and like to me, then like bringing liberating structures into the world, which are now taking off like crazy and just touching so many people. And I was wondering, like, are there any principles that you follow, or like what do you think is important to be successful in that kind of way that you were? Like, is there anything that guides you, or if you had any recommendations for young people, like the lessons that you learned?
Well, I mean, the reason I got interested in complexity was because um, my some of my basic ideas or principles about management and preferences were pretty simple. You know, one of them was that uh, my job was to help people be successful, not to tell them what to do, but to help them figure out what to do and to help them be as successful as possible, and preferably much more successful than they would ever thought that they could be. Okay. So that's a very nice idea. The question is, how do you do it? Okay. So the other aspect of my management philosophy is I don't like being told what to do. And so I assume that, you know, the things I don't like, other people probably don't like them either. And so, you know, another principle, if you want, is to treat people like you want to be treated. Okay, that's easier said than done. And so when you look at the way traditional organizations are functioning, you know, the process, the basic idea of commanding and controlling, and the basic idea of telling people what to do, and then you make sure they do it and you control that. This is not very attractive at all. And it doesn't fit with those simple two ideas of mine. Okay. And so I think that the reason why I got really attracted to complexity is that it provided me with this framework within which the way I like to work could fit. I could see that, you know, very, very easily. All right. And so that's really the where the initial attraction came from, you know. And for me it worked. I was very successful, and I still have fantastic relationship actually with the people that used to work for me. You know, 20 years after I retire, I mean, they don't have any reason to be connected with me, you know. And uh, I mean, just a few days ago, I was on the phone for, I don't know, half an hour or more with a former managing director of Norway, you know, somebody that I worked with in 1971, 71 to for several years, you know, when I was in Scandinavia. So this is how. And you know, that's one of the things that I believed. I believed in relationship. I believe that this was key to being successful, is to have, you know, the best possible relationship, so that you can actually argue and fight and disagree and, you know, and come up with things and so forth, and be friends at the same time. And, you know, and I had colleagues that believe absolutely the opposite. That were convinced that, you know, you must not have personal relationship or good relationship with the people that work for you, because you will not be able to make the tough decision. This is crap. It's bullshit. Yeah. But you have no idea how common that is. This is actually quite.
I think I do.
Well,
Yeah, I think I do have an idea of that. Yeah.
you have an idea. Okay. So then you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other things that you see people get wrong in your opinion very often? Like you see a certain pattern in real life and you feel like, oh no, not that again. Like that's probably a huge mistake.
You mean in terms of, well, I think that, you know, we learn, there were some things that you have come across that are sort of, you know, to put it down in the domain of of the, the casual. You know, one of the things, well, let me repeat what I said there, the first one, and that is this issue of relationship, that for me, relationship are fundamental. It is the most important thing.
Right.
The quality of the relationship between people determines the most important thing. Of course, the quality of people is important, but if you have fantastic people and the quality of relationship is bad, you're going to get garbage. Okay, so it is really central, and that is totally forgotten because it's kind of invisible. The relationship, people are visible, relationship are not so visible. So that's one thing. The other thing is this whole issue of participation and inclusion. That as you know, we have this very simple thing: nothing about me without me. You've heard that,
Right.
and my experience of being in a management position when I moved up in the organization is that this was happening all the time. When I first started, it was not happening because my first management job, I was managing director of a small country called Finland, which is a wonderful country. By the way, I recommend it. You should go there if you haven't been there. Wonderful people. And I'm totally objective, of course. And we had, what was it? It was, I think when I started, 15, 16, 17 people, I don't remember. So it was not really particularly complicated to get everybody in the room. Right? But as I moved up in the organization, most of the time, conversations took place without the people concerned being there or represented. And of course, it is not possible to understand somebody if that person is not in the room. And so the issue of inclusion, how do you include people? And when you start having size, and in my case, I was dealing with international organization, and you have distance, how do you include people? How do you make people part of the conversation? And so that's been, I think, one of my fascination actually with liberating structure is this ability that you have to include people. And of course, nowadays, which was not possible when I was working, is that the technology also makes possible things that a level of inclusion that was not accessible 20, 30 years ago, kind of thing.
Right. So when you're talking about the quality of the relationship, so I mean, I do something like organizational development, and a lot of people say like you should focus on the structures within a company, and like the culture is going to follow. Like the only thing you can actually influence is the structures, processes, stuff like that. What's your answer to that?
No. Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by structure. There's a difference between liberating structures and organization structure. Organization structures they are not fundamental in the sense that, if you change the organization structure, which a lot of people do, because that makes it look like you're making big decisions. If you don't change the relationship and the way people work, you haven't changed anything. You just created chaos because you've broken up all the relationship and all the partnership that existed and reorganized it in some other way. And now you have a whole bunch of people that have to relate to each other that were not familiar with each other, et cetera, and the decision-making process has been changed, and people have to get to know each other and learn how to work together. I mean, that's what you have created. But fundamentally, it's an illusion that you can solve problem by changing the structure. You have to change much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a way, the every structure that you're going to use, we will invite a different way of working. So it's really the way that you work that people work together that makes the difference. So you're back into this whole subject of relationship, you know, and relationship take time to build, particularly in a working organization. If you're not working, if you're not doing something deliberately to improve them, which is most of the time the case, because there is no attention paid to relationships. Attention is paid to work, output,
Right.
progress, results. Yeah. And people have to miraculously get along with each other and love each other and, you know, work fantastically well together, just like this. Boom. You know, I mean, who are we kidding?
I think that's really fascinating because so here's one thing I heard recently. You used to carry a card around that says rules for interacting with Henri. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you're referring to there.
Well, supposedly like I'm not gonna name names, but people said that like during your time as an executive, you had like these rules, or like the operations manual for Henri, something like that.
Oh, are you talking about my simple rules kind of thing? Yeah. This thing, I think I may have it here. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. What does it say?
Henri's personal do's and don'ts. I don't think you can read that.
No, do you just want to go through a few of them?
And yeah, this is another story. Actually, this is my list. It is not the list for other people.
Okay. Yeah.
It's my list. It is who I am trying to be, or who, when I was working, who I was trying to be. It is really a list of the things that I wish I would do all the time. And of course, I was never good enough to do that. And the reason I put it together one day is because when I moved from working in Scandinavia to working in the headquarters, I was extremely challenged by the culture. And when I found myself responsible for a group of departments in the headquarters, I realized that their habits, tradition, values, reflexes were very different from mine and from what I had been trying to do and working in Scandinavia with the various countries there and how I related to the people there and so forth. And I got very frustrated and I really had a hard time communicating and people didn't believe me. They didn't trust they didn't trust that they could disagree with me safely, for instance.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, so if I ask people, tell me what you think, they would tell me what they think I thought. Yeah, to be safe. I mean, because that's what they were comfortable with, agreeing with the boss. And I don't want anybody to agree with me. It's no fun. It's boring. And so one day I just went into hiding in my basement for a couple of days. And I put this list of things together to communicate with the people that work for me. I said, this is who I am trying to be. This is what I believe in. You know, it's not to tell you what to do, but this is who I am trying to be. And so this is my list. It's not a recipe for other people. Yeah, it's a list. And it's tough list.
Do you want to share it, or is that too private?
No, I've shared it with lots of people.
Okay.
You can have it. You don't have one?
I don't. Do you just want to like name a few of the things that are on there?
Oh. Well, there are 4 sections. One is on personal ethics, one is on organization, one is on personal development, and one is on workflow. And well, on personal ethics, for instance, it's there are things like be a role model, make people proud, be sincere, be flexible, allow mistakes, admit your mistakes. How about that? You know, things in organization, there's things like listen, open communication, encourage healthy competition. There's a do's and don'ts. So on the other side is don't allow destructive competition. Mm-hmm. Don't reward conformity. Don't allow bureaucracy. Don't stop learning. Don't isolate yourself. Don't let fear prevent action. Develop a sense of responsibility. On the do's on personal development. Train, try, improve. Train, try, improve. Train. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Oh man, yeah.
And take risks. Think outside the box. Don't forget to celebrate. Do not punish mistakes. On workflow, make work fun. Cut paperwork. Don't let numbers decide.
I think that's the opposite of what most people would say.
Well, you know, you do the numbers, but the numbers are information and they are full of assumptions. You do the numbers. And then you say, okay, what is right? What is the right thing to do? Mm-hmm. What is really important here? What do I believe? What do I feel? What will I commit myself to? You can't let the numbers make the decision. You can't blame the number for making a stupid decision. And it is not, numbers are not an excuse for doing something wrong. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, so in any case, it's just some of them, and it's kind of interesting to look at this. I haven't seen this for a long time. Oh, here's one of my favorites. Don't let committees decide. The committee has made a decision. Who is the committee?
Oh, yeah. So, like right now, what is kind of your learning edge, or like what are things that are puzzling you at the moment where you feel like you're stepping into something new, or you don't have an answer yet?
I am not sure I got your question there.
like when the things you've just been talking about, I'm sure there's a process behind, and like you encountered things that kind of puzzled you or you had to figure out, and I'm wondering like what are those things at the moment? So is there anything that like keeps you up at night, or problems you're trying to solve, or theories you're trying to wrap your head around?
Not really. I'm just, coasting, going with the flow, enjoying myself as much as possible. I mean, pleasure for me is this kind of conversation, for instance, being together with a friend, either physically present, which is, I don't get much of that because most of the people that I know are somewhere else, or just getting together like this on Zoom and talking with somebody and just sharing ideas and sort of, uh, trying to make sense of something to go somewhere and have a sense that you're making progress somehow because you're interacting with another person and your brain is, turning and turning, and the other one and the other person as well. And so that's the thing that I enjoy the most, one-on-one or with a small group of people. That is really, and and yeah, and then seeing what is happening with Liberating Structure now has been incredibly satisfying, obviously, even though I contribute very little, which is the ideal situation. This is exactly what I was hoping for, that a bunch of young people like yourself would grab this and run with it, and I can just cross my arm, and watch the action. And that's wonderful.
Is there any any direction you want to see Liberating Structures go in, or any hope you have for the further development of
Well,
Liberating?
I go back to that very simple thing, which is that at least a certain number of the simpler structure, the basic one, should be learned by everybody. Every kid in school should learn about them. Every teacher should use them because they are so simple. And they are, the same way that people learn how to make a presentation or write a paper or something like that, they should learn some of those structures because they are so fundamental to how you relate to other people and how you get things done. And this all, and how you help each other, how you work together, how you ask for help, how you include people, how you listen to other people. I mean, it's just very, very, very basic. As you know, one of my favorites is Troika Consulting. How simple is that? You know, but it's so big because we are all so bad at being clear about what our problems are and so bad at putting them into words, and even worse, so terrible at asking other people for help, and even worse at listening. And here's this little simple structure called Troika Consulting. And you just need two other people. And it helps you to do that. And if you use it and you use it and you get better and better and better, you have something that is good for the rest of your life. So why shouldn't everybody learn how to do that?
Um, I I can see a huge demand for bringing liberating structures to schools. Like that's actually the thing that most people talk to me about, and we're starting several initiatives to actually just achieve what you were just talking about. And I mean, I have two sons, and my hope would be once they reach school that at least there has been some kind of change. Like you said, it's I think it's like basic human repertoire of just being able to collaborate and interact with other people in a way that is just a little more helpful than having nothing, or just the conventional structures that we use without thinking about them too much.
Well, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, one of my rules is I assume that other people don't like what I don't like. And what I know is I don't like sitting on a wooden bench listening to somebody giving a lecture.
Right.
And I don't believe that any kid likes that. I assume that maybe there's some, masochistic exceptions around, but I don't think kids like that. And so I think it is possible to transform the way the classroom can be, at least most of the time, if not all the time. Yeah, and make it much more, not just more interesting, but I think they would learn so much more from each other. And by interacting with each other and helping each other and supporting each other and having something that is much more inclusive and active. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you use liberating structures with a group and they haven't used them before, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. There's this effect of they just work, and it's almost like people are reconnecting to something. It's not entirely new. It's not like they're like, oh, this is so different, but it's more like, oh, this is kind of what it should have been all along, or like this basic connection that happens, and it's more like a sigh of relief, like, oh, it actually is possible.
Yeah, it exists. It is. Yeah, you get that reaction. That's what I've been waiting for, you know.
Exactly.
And and uh, it's funny when you say this because it's actually my reaction for myself. One of my um, I shouldn't call it regrets or whatever, but one of my frustration is that I didn't know liberating structure when I was working, because a lot of what I did was still standard, still common. I was quite good at running bad meetings like everybody else. Maybe they were not as bad as most of the other people because they were more relaxed and more open and casual and that kind of thing. But they were still bad meetings because I didn't have structure. I used these normal structure. So we had a lot of what do you call it, a rodeo?
Goat rodeo, yeah.
Go rodeo, open conversation and that kind of thing. So yeah.
So when you're talking about the basic repertoire of like easy to learn liberating structures, so Troika's in there. What else?
Oh yeah. Oh, then I have to get my favorite present. One of my favorite presents. See, I have this. This is plastified, so I cannot destroy it. And it was done by a friend of ours, one who was part of the Plexus Institute community, actually, originally. One of the ladies that worked with us on MRSA infections also. So, all right, well, we're back to the top. One thing I want to add to this, which is important, is that there are two things in the structure. The structure itself, the whole thing, okay? But then you have, within structure, you have the questions, the invitations, okay? So even if you don't use the structure, the opportunity to use some of those questions is there all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And so, take like the invitation for appreciative interview, when was it that we had a very successful whatever it is that you're dealing with? That question is fundamental. What happened? What created those conditions? So you have those things that you can use, like in a one-on-one conversation. You can introduce those questions, very, very easily, and not to mention, what's the purpose?
Oh yeah.
and what can we do to make sure this is going to be a disaster? That's a good one. So yeah, so impromptu networking, definitely in the classroom, you can use that every single day. just get the students up, you know, 30 seconds, 1 minute, share with each other some answers, some experience, some whatever, you know. And what have you learned? You just finished this exercise. Okay, stand up, everybody in pairs, 30 seconds with each other, share, what have you learned from this? Yeah. Or what was the most challenging thing? Or what is it that you don't understand? What anything, any question like that, very quick exchange as a way of debriefing the entire group. What, so what, now what, obviously. Yeah. The TRIZ, I think, can be used, appreciative interview, yeah. 1, 2 for all, obviously, the fishbowl. 25-10. Troika, or definitely, and the cafe. And so, you know, this, for instance, you can use in the classroom on a, you know, in the moment decision or plan within the lesson. Yeah. And then, you know, if you have projects or things like that, you can do a shift and share.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where students would go around and learn from each other. It depends how far, it depends a little bit on the subjects, or, you know, what is it that they are. If you have a project or something, I mean, this is a little more advanced maybe, but the what I need from you could be quite interesting to do in a classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's plenty. You know, you don't need, listen, if you could get teacher to you just 3 or 4 of those things, just to get into the mode of participation and inclusion, just to get away from the lecture, you know, and to you know, to design material, give material, the lecture material in a different form. Yeah, that's, I don't know, by bite size or whatever. You know, it depends on the age, I think. But you need to reinvent how you do the learning. There is no question about it. You know, I think that if you're dealing with older students, pretty easy to give them material in advance. You know, they don't need to be in the classroom to listen to a lecture. Yeah, I mean, it can be by the swimming pools, looking at the lecture, much better.
Yeah, I think, I mean,
Yeah.
the current situation kind of shows us what's possible, right? And it's
Yeah.
like we had a certain way of doing things, and then suddenly
Yeah.
like, other things are possible. Huh?
But the interactive part, you know, I mean, you want to use the time when they are together physically in the same room to do things that you can only do when you are physically together in the same room.
Yeah.
And not stuff that you can do remotely. So, but, and the thing that I would like to add to this is that okay, I don't know what to do with this thing, is that it would be good for the teachers and the professor, because it would make their work much more rewarding and fun and varied, instead of repeating every year the same lecture on the same subject. Yeah, and I know some professor who have gone through this transition, and they say, you know, this has opened up a whole new life for them. and the quality of interaction with their students that is completely different. And the relationship with the students that is completely different. And of course, the students love those teachers and professors that do that because there is relationship in the classroom. It becomes a family, it becomes a community, it becomes, so many of the classrooms that they're not at the lower level so much, but when you go to the college level, that kind of thing, the kids come into the classroom and then go out. And they don't talk to each other. Maybe some because they have an existing relationship or that kind of thing, but mostly the classroom is does not exist. It
Yeah.
only exists physically, chairs and tables and that kind of thing. When you start using liberating structure in the classroom, you create a community. The students become a group because they talk to each other, they help each other, they relate to each other, they do things together all the time. And it becomes like a huge family. And that changes the dynamics and the quality of life for those students dramatically. And same thing in terms of their relationship with the professor. So this is a big deal. It's not just a little technique. It is that too. It is a little technique that can make the teaching more effective, that can make a meeting more effective. But it is much more profound than that, much more.
So I think I want to know two more things. We're just watching the time a bit here, and one is, um, so liberating structures are what you call expertless, and like people can use them immediately, and they get great results. Is there anything people can do to still give others like a really bad time when they're using liberating structures? Like kind of the Triz version of this, like what would you need to do when you're using liberating structures to just kind of make it go sideways?
I think so. I mean, they're agnostic. I suppose that if you are a mafia boss, you can use liberating structures. I think, it's yeah, you can use them. You use liberating structure to get better results. So I suppose if you're a mafia boss and you use liberating structure, you should be able to get better results. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I mean, I made somebody laugh the other day because I said that liberating structures do not have a soul. It's like a hammer. Hammers don't have soul. When you hit your finger with a hammer, it's not the hammer's fault. The hammer doesn't have a soul.
Mm-hmm.
The hammer doesn't decide to hit your finger. It just does what it is designed to do. And I think the structures are the same. They are designed to achieve particular objective. And so if you do, going back to Troika Consulting, if you ask a couple of people to help you with a challenge that is a horrible thing to do, and you get good advice, it will make you more capable of doing something horrible, even more horrible, maybe, or whatever. I, they are, you know, am I saying something that is shocking to you, or?
No, that's it's actually something I've talked to other people about, like when liberating structures, when it was clear that liberating structures were becoming quite popular, then we were kind of wondering at what point. I mean, in Germany, we have a couple of right-wing people, and we were trying, like we were also talking about liberating structures, using liberating structures in politics and things like that. And at some point, we had this idea of, what is like when, like at some point, maybe like a neo-Nazi organization might use liberating structures as well, just to become a little more productive or to include more people, you know. And that's just like you said, I'm guessing
Well,
they're neutral in that way, that they can be used for like different purposes.
yeah, I think that, you know, the uh, you can't separate the structure from their purpose and the intention, you know. So, you know, uh, I remember a workshop that we had some years back, and there was a lady participating in the workshop who said that, that when we went into the design phase of the workshop of creating strings, creating designs, to achieve particular purpose. And we asked for volunteers for somebody, to submit something that they are trying to do that they would like to create a string for. One of the ladies said, I am very upset because I have some very good friends. I'm a Democrat. I have some very good friends who are Republican, and we are not able to. We used to get together on a regular basis, and we had lunches and things, and it was very nice. And now it's become impossible. We are not able to. We're not able to have a pleasant time together because every time the conversation degenerates and so forth, and I have no idea what to do. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we created, or she created, together with a few other participants, a string to address that, actually, and some young one of the participants in that group was a student who ended up being drafted as the facilitator for her next lunch.
Wow.
And and they used the string, and it worked, and they started being able to have conversations together again. So you can use them constructively, but you can use them destructively. I mean, it is um, the thing. The thing that is true is that if you become much more inclusive, and so it depends which structure you're using, it becomes difficult to do something that goes against uh, the desires and the wishes and the competence of many of the participants. It becomes a much more challenging thing because it's out in the open. You cannot, in most organizations, decisions are made at the top, and all the people that don't agree, they're not in the room. You don't hear them. They just, you have to deal with them afterwards.
Right.
But they're, if you're really inclusive and you have that participation, you have to deal with it in real time, and that can make it difficult to do the wrong thing. Much more difficult, if not impossible.
Right. Okay. Last question. I have a quick bonus question. I think we've talked about this before, but it's almost like we as a human species, we have this fascination with bad news and like really try to focus on negative things. So like, what are some of the things that give you hope at the moment?
At the moment, you mean with this, in the middle of this pandemic?
Yes.
Well, I think that it is at the local level. What we are seeing is, I think, and I am not such a good witness because I'm isolated and I'm not socially active that much. So I have a feeling that there's a fair amount of people reaching out to each other, and there is a greater awareness of the people that are taking the brunt of what is going on much more than others because they are either poor or because they are on the front line or because they are medical staff and so forth. And so there is there's a greater appreciation suddenly for all kinds of people that are doing work at many different levels, people that are delivering the food or the meals or that kind of thing, and so that's a very optimistic sign. Will it last? What will it translated itself socially? Will it make a difference? Uh, because you know, the power is still concentrated. So will that change something? I don't know, but I'm a little bit optimistic that it will. And the the other thing is that I think this brings a greater awareness for everybody of the importance of personal contact and relationship and interactions, and how much that matters, and we are lucky that we can do quite a bit of that virtually, and for people like you and me who know each other already, we've been physically together and we are friends. When we are together virtually, it's almost as if we were together, you know, in the same room, because we can bridge that divide, because we know each other and we trust each other and we like each other already. So I think that those are important things. At a bigger level, I don't know. I really don't know. Is there going to be a greater sense of solidarity on a global level? Because the virus doesn't really care whether you are in the south, the north, the east, or the west, or in a rich country, poor country, and so forth. Is there going to be more sense of global responsibility? I don't know. There's I don't know. I mean, we seem to have an infinite ability to fight as a human race, to get into war too. I don't know. I I don't know what the genetic background of that, but it is really going on. It's been going on forever, and it's quite sad to see some of this, and so I don't know. I I don't know, because until uh, it looked until, I don't know, some 20 years ago, um, or 30 years ago it is now, like everything was going in the right direction, and then things started going south again on a global political level. It looked like everything was getting better, and the wall came down, and in Berlin, I'm sure you remember that.
Yeah, some of it. I mean, I was 6 years old, so.
Yeah, but still, I'm sure you heard about it afterwards. So, there was those big changes that were going all in the right direction, and then conflict started again, and uh, and and wars and terrorism and that kind of thing. So, I don't know. Is this going to help? Uh, I don't think anybody knows. But I think at the personal level, it's going to make a difference for a large number of people at the personal level.
Right.
And uh, but it's I think the way I look at it also is that uh, I can't control what is happening. besides what I do. And so I just tried to do what I think is right for myself and for the people around me, you know, and then others take from it whatever they take from it. You know, I can't control that, and I have. I think this acceptance of not being in control, which comes with liberating structures, actually, you know, and which is something that I learned very early in my career because of the kind of jobs that I had. You know, when I became director for Scandinavia at a very young age. You know, I was in my, what was I, 30 something, 33 or 4 or something like that. You know, it became pretty clear quickly to me that I could not be in control because I was not there. I was in one place. There was, you know, 4 countries, 5 if you count Iceland. And there was no way for me to know in the details what was going on in each other country. It was impossible. I was not, even though I was technically the boss, I was not really in charge. I could not be in charge. I could pretend to be. I could pretend to be the boss. I could act like I was the boss. I could do all kinds of things like that. But in reality, I wasn't. And I was, you know, it was a very important turning point for me to accept that reality. Is I'm not in control. So what can I do? How can I, you know, contribute? How can I make a difference? How can I help each one of those countries be more successful where I am not in control and I don't really know what is going on? And that was a big deal because that was untraditional, you know. The people that I followed and many other of my colleagues, you know, acted as if they were in control. You know, I'm the boss. And
That's what a good manager is, right?
pardon?
That's what a good manager is, right? Always in control.
Yeah, sure. And the so this is it's a big deal, you know. It's a big shift when you think that way. You know, when you ask what do I think, well, I'm not in control. So you look at what can I do? What else can I do? You know, how can I make a difference? How can I contribute? How can I help? How can I do something that will help things move in the right directions? Yeah, and so it's maybe that's what maybe this conversation is one piece. Yeah, and and I certainly believe that liberating structure is one piece, one contribution. What will become of it, I have no idea. I'm not going to be around in any case for that long, so it's good enough an answer. I don't know.
That's beautiful. And I'm so thankful that we can spend this time. And also, I mean, I've been meaning to ask you things like that because I think there's so much to be learned from you and from the things you've experienced and just, I mean, I try to grow into life and figuring out what's going on. And I think like what you just said about not actually being in control, but still having a certain kind of control on the personal level and just doing your part. I think that is so important. All right, so let's shift gears. I have a bonus question for you. I heard you make a really good steak tartare.
Oh, absolutely.
What's your secret?
There's no secret. It's the the only thing is that it's a little imprecise in terms of the quantities, but I can share that with you, and then I will dig out. There is somewhere a piece of paper, I think, that has the so-called basic recipe, and then I will. We can have another call. I will tell you what I do actually.
Great. Do you put capers in it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, eggs, mustard. I mean, it's the dressing. I mean, you make essentially what you do. You make a dressing, and then in that dressing you throw in the chopped meat or the ground meat,
Hmm.
and and the dressing is pretty substantial quantity. Well, it depends on how much meat you're going to put in there, but it has eggs, mustard, capers, onions, Tabasco sauce, Worcestershire sauce, what else? Salt, pepper, if you want. Uh, that's the essential part of it, But you make a dressing. Actually you make more like it's more like a mayonnaise actually, because you start with the eggs and the mustard, which is the same thing. And oh, I forgot oil. Yeah, and so it's the same kind of thing as you would do if you made a mayonnaise in a way.
Awesome.
But with in addition, you have the onions and the capers and all this kind of chop capers, and it's yummy. But except for people who are horrified by the idea of eating raw meat, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I know quite a lot of people, but I think it's fascinating. I've heard so much about it, so I thought I'd ask you.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I have I have people that will. I just have to tell them I'm making that, and they will automatically come for dinner. It's very. I have a neighbor in France like that who loves it. So yeah, it's good. So this is a bonus question?
That was the bonus question. That's right.
Uh,
All right. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful just to know you and to be connected to you. And I think like what you're giving the world is just absolutely remarkable.
a pleasure, and it was fun. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but it feels like it's a little long.
Yeah, it might be. All right.
All right.